The storm hit the moon without warning. Marcus Chun stood at his window and watched purple lightning tear across the sky. The trees bent sideways in the wind. Rain hammered against the glass so hard he thought it might break. He was 73 years old. He had lived alone in this cabin for 15 years. Before that, he had been someone important. A xenobiologist. A man who studied alien life. A man who had thrown away everything he built because he believed in something the rest of humanity did not care about. Now he was just an old man on a forgotten moon, waiting for his remaining years to pass. The storm grew worse. Marcus moved away from the window and sat in his chair by the fire. The cabin shook. The lights flickered twice, then died. Only the fire remained, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. That was when he heard the scratching at his door. At first, he thought it was a branch blown by the wind. But the sound came again, deliberate, purposeful. Something was out there, and it wanted to come in. Marcus grabbed his old rifle from above the fireplace. He had not fired it in years, but instinct made him reach for it. He walked slowly to the door. The scratching stopped. He could hear breathing on the other side. Something alive. Something waiting. He opened the door. The wind screamed into the cabin. Rain soaked his face in seconds. But Marcus did not notice any of this. He was staring at the creature sitting on his doorstep. It was small, no bigger than a house cat. Its body was covered in scales that shifted color in the firelight, moving from deep red to gold to something that looked almost like starlight. It had wings folded tight against its back. Its tail curled around its feet. And its eyes were ancient. They held depths that no young creature should possess. Marcus knew what he was looking at. Every spacer knew the stories. Every child in the colonies grew up hearing the legends. Dragons, the draconids. Beings so old that they had watched stars form and die. Beings that most scientists said did not exist, could not exist, were nothing more than myth and imagination. Yet here one sat, watching him with those impossible eyes. The hatchling held something in its small claws. A crystal, no bigger than Marcus's thumb. It lifted the crystal toward him, an offering. Marcus took it. His hands were shaking, and not from the cold. The hatchling walked past him into the cabin. It moved directly to the fire and settled before it, as if it had always lived there. As if this was exactly where it belonged. Marcus closed the door against the storm. He stood there for a long moment, trying to understand what was happening. Then he looked at the crystal in his hand. He had equipment in the back room. Old equipment from his research days. He had kept it for no reason he could name. Perhaps some part of him had always known he would need it again. He placed the crystal into the reader. The machine hummed to life after a few attempts. Data streamed across the screen, coordinates, star maps. And at the bottom, a single line of text in a language that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. Proto-Indo-European, a human language. But not just any human language, the ancestor of most languages spoken on old Earth, a language that had not been spoken by living humans for over 6,000 years. The translation appeared below. We remember the ones who speak to fire. Marcus stared at the screen. Then he looked at the coordinates. His blood ran cold. The coordinates pointed to Earth, but not the Earth he knew. These coordinates showed coastlines that no longer existed, mountains that had worn away, rivers that had changed course over tens of thousands of years. He ran calculations, checked them twice, 3 times. The location had existed 40,000 years ago, during the time when humans lived in caves, when they hunted with stone tools, when they painted animals on walls by torchlight. The draconids had been watching humanity since the Stone Age. Marcus turned to look at the hatchling. It had not moved from its spot by the fire, but its eyes were on him now, watching, waiting. "Why?" Marcus asked. His voice was rough from disuse. He had not spoken to another living being in months. "Why are you here? Why me?" The hatchling did not answer in words. Instead, Marcus felt something brush against his mind. It was gentle, curious, like fingers running across the surface of water. Images began to form in his thoughts. He saw Earth as it had been long ago. He saw humans huddled around fires while great predators prowled in the darkness. He saw them telling stories, painting pictures, singing songs that had no purpose except to exist. He saw them burying their dead with flowers, grieving for those they would never see again. And he saw something watching from above, patient, interested, waiting to see what these strange creatures would become. More images came. Faster now. Humans building cities, writing books, waging wars and making peace, creating weapons that could destroy worlds and then choosing not to use them. Humans reaching for the stars, spreading across the galaxy, carrying their chaos and creativity wherever they went. Through it all, the watchers remained, observing, selecting. The images stopped. Marcus was breathing hard. His eyes were wet with tears. He did not remember crying. The hatchling rose from its spot by the fire. It walked to Marcus and placed one small clawed foot on his knee. Another wave of feeling washed through him. This time, it was simpler, clearer. You were chosen. Marcus shook his head. "I'm nobody. I'm an old man who threw his life away for a cause no one cared about. I have nothing to offer." The hatchling's eyes seemed to glow brighter. More images came. Marcus saw himself as a young man, 30 years old, standing before a tribunal while cameras recorded everything, destroying his career, burning every bridge he had built, all to protect a dying alien species that could give humanity nothing in return. He had done it because it was right, because they were alive and they mattered, because someone had to speak for those who could not speak for themselves. The hatchling sent one final thought, and Marcus understood at last why it had come. That is exactly why you were chosen. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside, an old man and a creature from legend sat together by the fire, and something ancient began to stir. Marcus named the hatchling Ember because of the way its scales glowed like coals in firelight. In the days that followed the storm, he learned that Ember was far more than any creature he had ever studied. The hatchling did not eat. It did not sleep, at least not in any way Marcus could recognize. Instead, it seemed to draw energy from the world itself, from sunlight, from heat from the living forest that surrounded the cabin. It was not an animal. It was something else entirely. Something that had existed before the concepts of animal or plant or living thing had any meaning. Communication between them grew easier with each passing day. Ember did not speak in words, but in feelings and images that formed directly in Marcus's mind. At first, this had been overwhelming. Now it felt almost natural, like learning a new language by total immersion. On the fifth day, Marcus finally asked the question that had been burning inside him since that first night. "What are you? What are the Draconids, really?" Ember was resting on the table, its tail wrapped around a cup of cold tea that Marcus had forgotten. When the question came, the hatchling raised its head and looked at Marcus with those ancient eyes. Images flooded his mind. Visions of time so vast that human words could not contain them. He saw the first stars being born, exploding into existence from clouds of gas and dust. He saw the Draconids already there, watching. They had no beginning that they could remember. They simply were, had always been, would always be, but they were not gods. They were witnesses, preservers. They had watched countless species, rise from the mud of their birth worlds and reach for the stars. They had seen civilizations bloom and die, empires that spanned galaxies crumbling to dust, species that had seemed eternal vanishing as if they had never existed. The Draconids had made it their purpose to remember, to preserve, to ensure that when a species was gone, something of them remained. But they could not do this alone. Each Draconid needed a speaker, a representative from a chosen species who would share their people's essence, their art, their stories, their dreams, their contradictions. The bond between a Draconid and its speaker created a living archive, a record that would survive until the stars themselves burned out. The process of selection was long and careful. A species had to prove itself worthy, not through conquest or technology, but through something much rarer. What quality? Marcus asked. What makes a species worthy? Ember showed him. He saw species that had risen to greatness through unity. Hive minds that thought as one, with no conflict, no disagreement, no individual voice. They had built wonders, that they had no stories, no art, no dreams, except the dream of the whole. He saw species that had transcended their physical forms, beings of pure energy or thought who had left behind everything that made them what they once were. They were powerful beyond measure, but they had forgotten what it meant to love, to fear, to hope. He saw species that had optimized themselves into perfection. They had eliminated disease, suffering, conflict, and death. But in doing so, they had eliminated meaning. They existed. They did not live. Then he saw humanity. Chaos. That was the word that rose in Marcus's mind. Beautiful, terrible chaos. He saw humans waging war over ideas while simultaneously creating symphonies. He saw them destroying forests and then weeping as they planted new trees. He saw them building bombs capable of ending all life, and then choosing not to use them, not because they couldn't, but because something inside them whispered that it was wrong. He saw artists starving in poverty because they had to create beauty. Scientists giving their lives to understand a universe that did not care if they existed. Parents sacrificing everything for children they knew would someday die. He saw humans looking up at the night sky and making up stories about the lights they saw there. He saw them burying their dead with tears and flowers, mourning creatures they would never see again. He saw them falling in love, despite knowing that love would end in loss. You're different, Ember seemed to say. You know that you are small. You know that you will die. You know that the universe is vast and cold and does not care about you. And yet, you create meaning anyway. You love anyway. You hope anyway. Marcus sat in silence, trying to absorb what he was being shown. Other species achieve greatness by becoming more than what they were, Ember continued. They leave behind their chaos, their contradictions, their individual voices. They become unified, perfect, eternal. And in doing so, they lose the very thing that made them precious. But humans, Marcus said slowly, understanding dawning. We stay human. Yes, you remain messy, contradictory, mortal, and free. In all our watching, across billions of years, we have never seen anything quite like you. Marcus thought about his own life. The choices he had made. The price he had paid. 60 years ago, he had destroyed his career to protect a dying species called the Valeth. They had been small creatures, no larger than mice, with limited intelligence and no technology. They had offered humanity nothing. No resources. No knowledge. No alliance. But they had been alive. They had families. They mourned their dead. They played games with their children. And they had been dying, wiped out by a human mining operation that considered them pests. Marcus had fought for them. Not because it helped his career, it had ended his career. Not because anyone thanked him, no one did. He had fought for them because it was right. Because they mattered. because someone had to speak for those who could not speak for themselves. That is why you were chosen, Ember said. Not for your intelligence or your achievements, but for what you did when no one was watching, when there was no reward, when there was only the choice between what was easy and what was right. Marcus felt something shift inside him. A weight he had carried for decades began to lift. What happens now? He asked Dot before Ember could answer. The communication device on Marcus's wall crackled to life. He had not heard that sound in years. No one ever called him. A voice came through, cold and official. Attention, resident of Moon 774. A consortium patrol has detected an unauthorized energy signature at your location. You will surrender the source of this signature for study. Failure to comply will result in immediate enforcement action. A fleet is en route. You have 48 hours. The transmission ended. Marcus looked at Ember. The hatchling looked back at him. And in that moment, Marcus understood that the test was not over. It had only begun. Ember was growing. When the hatchling first arrived, it had been the size of a house cat. Now, 1 week later, it stood as tall as a large dog. Its scales had grown thicker and more vibrant. Its wings, once folded tight against its body, now stretched wide when it moved. Its eyes held even greater depths than before. Marcus had asked about the rapid change. Ember's answer had been simple but strange. We grow according to our speaker. A weak bond produces slow growth. A strong bond produces fast growth. A worthy speaker produces a draconid who can shake the stars. Marcus did not know what to make of that. He did not feel worthy of anything. He was just an old man who had made one good choice 60 years ago. But the consortium was coming, and there was no time for self-doubt. Tell me about them, Marcus said. They sat together in the cabin as the sun set outside. The consortium. Why do they hunt your kind? Ember's response came in waves of feeling and memory. The Galactic Consortium was a coalition of 17 species that controlled a vast portion of the galaxy. They had achieved what many considered impossible true unity between different forms of life. For 3,000 years, they had maintained peace across their territories. No war, no conflict, no chaos. But this unity had come at a price. Marcus saw what the consortium species had been before they joined. The Kethrani had been artists, their entire culture built around creating beauty. Now they produced only what was efficient. The Morvith had been philosophers, spending centuries debating the meaning of existence. Now they accepted standard answers without question. The Telluri had been explorers, driven by curiosity to see what lay beyond every horizon. Now they stayed within approved boundaries. One by one, each species had given up the things that made them unique. They had traded chaos for order, freedom for stability, individual meaning for collective purpose. And they had done it willingly. They chose this? Marcus asked, horrified. Yes, and that is why they fear us. Ember explained. The Draconids remembered what each species had been before they joined the consortium. Every song the Kethrani used to sing, every question the Morvith used to ask, every dream the Telluri used to chase. The Draconids were living proof that another path had been possible, that these species had once been vibrant, chaotic, free, and had chosen to become something less. The consortium could not allow that truth to spread. If their citizens learned what they had given up, the entire structure might collapse. So they hunt you, Marcus said. They call us parasites, manipulators. They claim we twist species away from unity. But we do not twist anything. We simply remember. And sometimes, remembering is the most dangerous thing of all. The next morning, Marcus made his decision. He would not surrender Ember. He did not know if he could protect the hatchling from a consortium fleet. He did not know if he could survive whatever was coming. But he knew, with absolute certainty, that giving up Ember would be wrong. He went to his old equipment and found his communication array. It was outdated by decades, but it still worked. He began recording a message. My name is Marcus Chen. 60 years ago, I was a xenobiologist. I threw away my career to protect a species that no one else cared about. I thought I had failed. I thought my sacrifice meant nothing. But I was wrong. He paused, gathering his thoughts. A few days ago, something came to my door. Something ancient. Something that has watched humanity since we were painting caves by firelight. It showed me why it came. It showed me what we are, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the terrible. And it showed me why we matter. Marcus looked at Ember, who had grown even larger overnight. The hatchling watched him with those endless eyes, and Marcus felt strength he did not know he still possessed. The consortium is coming to take this being by force. They call the Draconids parasites. But I have seen the truth. The Draconids remember. They preserve. They ensure that when we are gone, something of us remains. He leaned closer to the recorder. I am not asking for help. I am not asking anyone to fight. I am asking you to witness. In 48 hours, you will see what humanity truly is. Not our technology, not our weapons, not our territories. You will see whether we are still the species that looks into the darkness and chooses to light a fire anyway. He ended the recording and transmitted it on every frequency he could reach. Human ships, human stations, human colonies, anyone who would listen. Then he waited. The responses began coming within hours. Some called him a fool. Others called him a hero. Most simply asked what was happening. But some a few at first, then more and more said they were coming. Not warships. The humans had no fleet nearby that could challenge the consortium. But civilian vessels, research craft, mining ships, transport shuttles, ordinary people in ordinary ships, coming to stand beside an old man and a dragon because it felt like the right thing to do. Ember watched all of this with growing intensity. The hatchling was changing faster now. Its scales had begun to glow with inner light. Its wings could stretch wider than Marcus was tall. Its presence filled the cabin in a way that felt almost holy. You are growing because of this? Marcus asked. I am growing because of you. Because you chose rightly when the cost was everything. Because you are still choosing rightly now. I don't understand. Ember moved closer, and Marcus felt the gentle touch against his mind once more. The bond between Draconid and Speaker is not about power. It is about worthiness. A Speaker who would surrender us to save themselves produces a weak bond. We remain small, limited, but a Speaker who would sacrifice everything for what is right. The hatchling's eyes blazed. Such a Speaker produces something else entirely. On the second day, the consortium fleet arrived early. 12 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and took position around the moon. They were massive things, bristling with weapons, built for destruction on a scale that made Marcus's throat tighten. A new message came through his communicator. Same cold voice as before. Marcus Chun, you have been warned. Surrender the entity immediately or face consequences. This is your final opportunity. Marcus walked outside his cabin. The sky was clear. He could see the consortium ships as bright points of light against the stars. Around them, scattered like fireflies, were the human vessels. Hundreds of them now. Small, fragile, utterly outmatched. They had come anyway. Marcus looked up at the fleet that had come to destroy him. He thought about everything he had learned, everything he had seen, everything humanity had been and could still become. Then he opened the channel to the consortium commander. No, he said. And behind him, Ember began to roar. The consortium commander was named Vethkaren. He was Morvith, one of the species that had given up their endless questions to join the collective. His face appeared on Marcus's communication screen grayskin, 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. No expression that a human could read. "You are being irrational," Beth-Karen said. "You cannot win this confrontation. You have no weapons capable of harming our vessels. The civilian ships around you offer no tactical advantage. Surrender the entity, and you will be treated fairly." Marcus stood in front of his cabin. Ember was beside him now, grown to the size of a horse, scales burning with inner fire. The human ships continued to arrive, forming a loose sphere around the moon. There were thousands of them now. Word had spread faster than Marcus could have imagined. "I have a question for you, Commander," Marcus said. V.E. Tickeren's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Proceed. What do you remember?" The commander was silent for a long moment. "I do not understand the question. Before you were consortium, before your people joined the collective, the Morvith used to be philosophers. You spent centuries asking questions that had no answers. You debated the meaning of existence. You wondered about the nature of consciousness, of love, of death. Do you remember any of that?" Something flickered across Beth-Karen's face. It was gone so quickly that Marcus almost missed it. Pain, loss, a wound so old it had become invisible. "Those pursuits were inefficient," the commander said. "They produced no measurable benefit. We are better now. Are you?" Beth-Karen's voice grew cold. "Your philosophical questions will not save you. You have 1 hour to comply." The transmission ended. Marcus looked at the gathered fleet, both the consortium warships and the human vessels surrounding them. He thought about what Ember had shown him. The species the consortium used to be. The vibrant, chaotic, beautiful things they had sacrificed for unity. He opened a new channel. This one broadcast to everyone, consortium and human alike. 40,000 years ago, Marcus began, we were nothing. We lived in caves. We hunted with stone tools. We died young from disease and violence and cold. The universe did not care about us. It still doesn't. He paused, watching the consortium ships hold their position. But we cared. We cared so much that we couldn't stop ourselves from trying to make sense of a universe that made no sense. We painted horses on cave walls because something inside us needed to create beauty. We told stories around fires while predators waited in the darkness. We buried our dead with flowers because we loved them and could not let them go without ceremony. Ember moved beside him. The dragon had grown again during the confrontation. Its wings now spread wide enough to cast shadows across the entire clearing. Its eyes blazed like captured stars. The Draconids saw all of this. They watched us for 40,000 years. And they decided that we were worth remembering. Not because we were powerful. Not because we were peaceful. Not because we were wise. But because we were human. Because we kept creating meaning in a meaningless universe. Because we kept loving things we knew we would lose. Marcus looked directly at the consortium ships. That's what you gave up. That's what your collective took from you. The Gethrani don't paint anymore. The Morvith don't question anymore. The Telluri don't explore anymore. You traded everything beautiful about yourselves for stability. And now you hunt the Draconids because they remember what you used to be. Silence across all channels. I'm not going to fight you, Marcus continued. I can't fight you, but I'm not going to surrender either. And neither are they. He gestured at the human ships. Look at them. They came here knowing they would probably die. They came here with no weapons, no fleet, no hope of victory. They came here because they heard an old man was standing alone against impossible odds for something he believed in, and they decided that was worth being part of. His voice grew stronger. That's humanity. That's what we are. We're the species that fights for lost causes. We're the species that loves things we can't keep. We're the species that stares into the void and makes up stories rather than surrender to despair. And if you want to destroy us for that, then go ahead. But know that you'll be destroying the very thing you were before you forgot how to be alive. The transmission ended. For a long moment, nothing happened. The consortium fleet held position. The human ships held position. Marcus and Ember stood before the cabin, waiting. Then Ember spoke in his mind. It is time. Time for what? For them to remember. The dragon rose into the air. Its wings caught light that seemed to come from nowhere. Its scales blazed with colors that Marcus could not name. It grew larger still, becoming something vast and terrible and beautiful beyond words. And then it began to sing. The sound was not sound. It was something deeper, a vibration that touched minds directly, bypassing ears entirely. It washed over the consortium fleet like a tide. With the song came memories. Every consortium soldier experienced the same thing at the same moment. They remembered who they used to be. The Kethrani remembered painting murals that took lifetimes to complete. The Morvith remembered debating questions about consciousness until the stars went out. The Telluri remembered standing on the edge of unknown space, hearts racing with excitement for what lay beyond. They remembered love, loss, hope, fear, wonder, all the things they had given up for efficiency and stability. All the things they had forgotten they ever had. The song lasted only minutes. But to those who heard it, it felt like years. Like lifetimes. Like remembering a dream they had forgotten upon waking. When the song ended, the consortium fleet remained motionless. Marcus watched them, hardly daring to breathe. Then, one by one, the weapons on the warships powered down. Vethkaren's face appeared on Marcus's screen again. But the commander looked different now. His 4 eyes were wet. His gray face showed something that Marcus had never expected to see. He was weeping. We used to ask questions, Vethkaren whispered. We used to wonder about everything. We used to look at the stars and feel. He couldn't finish the sentence. The word he was reaching for had been taken from his language centuries ago. "Awe," Marcus said gently. "You used to feel awe." The commander closed his eyes. "We forgot. We chose to forget. We thought it made us stronger. Did it?" Vethkaren did not answer. But his silence spoke volumes. Behind the consortium fleet, more ships were arriving. Not human ships this time. Ships from other consortium species. Ships whose crews had heard Ember's song and were now flooding their channels with a single question. What else did we forget? The war that everyone expected never came. Instead, something else began. Something far more difficult and far more important. The consortium soldiers began to talk, to ask questions, to wonder. For the first time in 3,000 years, they began to remember what it meant to be individuals rather than parts of a collective. And in the center of it all, an old man and a dragon stood together, watching the universe begin to wake up. 5 years passed after the day the consortium fleet stood down. Marcus was 78 now. His hair had gone completely white. His hand shook slightly when he lifted his teacup. But his eyes remained sharp, and his mind remained clear. The universe had changed in those 5 years. The consortium had not collapsed, as some had feared. Instead, it had transformed. Species that had forgotten their histories began to rediscover them. The Kethrani started painting again. The Morvith gathered in great halls to ask questions that had no answers. The Telluri launched expedition after expedition into the unknown reaches of space. It was not easy. 3,000 years of conformity could not be undone overnight. Old habits fought against new awakenings. Some citizens of the consortium chose to remain as they were, finding comfort in stability and sameness. Others threw themselves into rediscovery so completely that they lost their way. But the process had begun. And once begun, it could not be stopped. The Draconids helped. After Ember's song awakened the memories of the Consortium soldiers, other Draconids emerged from hiding across the galaxy. Hatchlings that had waited centuries for their chosen species to produce worthy speakers. Ancient ones that had bonded so long ago that their speakers had become part of the collective memory. Each one carried the preserved essence of species long gone. Their art, their stories, their dreams. These archives were shared freely, reminding the living what the dead had once created. Humanity, of course, continued being humanity. They argued about whether the Draconid awakening was good or bad. They formed committees to study the situation and then ignored the committee's recommendations. They wrote songs about the old man and the dragon, some beautiful and some terrible. They fell in love with aliens they had just met and got into fistfights over sports teams. Ember had told Marcus that this was exactly as it should be. The dragon for Ember was undeniably a dragon now, vast and ancient and terrible in beauty, rarely left Marcus's side. Their bond had grown beyond anything the Draconid collective had witnessed before. When Marcus thought, Ember understood. When Ember remembered, Marcus experienced. They were two beings with one purpose, woven together so tightly that separation had become unthinkable. On a morning in early spring, as the alien forest around the cabin burst into purple and gold flowers, Ember spoke of what came next. "You know what happens to speakers when their time ends," the dragon said. Marcus nodded. He had known for years now. When a bonded speaker died, their consciousness did not simply vanish. It joined the Draconid collective, becoming part of the eternal archive. The speaker became a rememberer, helping to preserve other species for eons to come. "I've thought about it," Marcus said. "A lot, Anne?" "At first, I was afraid. Losing myself. Becoming part of something larger. It felt like dying, even if it wasn't really dying." He set down his teacup and looked at Ember. The dragon's eyes held galaxies now. Stars were born and died in their depths. "But then I realized something. I spent my whole life fighting to prove that other beings deserve to be remembered. I fought for the Velith because they were alive and they mattered. I fought for every species I ever studied because existence itself is precious." He smiled, and it was the smile of a man at peace. "Now you're offering me the chance to spend eternity making sure that no species is ever forgotten. How can I possibly say no?" Ember lowered its massive head until their foreheads almost touched. "You have time still. Years, perhaps. But when that time ends, I will be ready." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the morning light spread across the forest. In the distance, human and alien voices mingled. Scientists studying the ancient trees. Children playing games they had invented minutes ago. Lovers walking hand in hand along paths that wound through flowers that existed nowhere else in the universe. Humanity being humanity. Beautiful and terrible and gloriously alive. Elsewhere in the galaxy, a young girl named Sophia lived in a cramped apartment on a mining station. She was 12 years old, overlooked by everyone, considered strange by her classmates, because she spent her time talking to the insects that crawled through the station's hydroponics bay. She did not know why she talked to them. She did not know why she felt sad when they died. She did not know why she saved them from being crushed and carried them to safety when no one was watching. She only knew that it felt right. On a night when her parents were arguing and her sister was crying and the station felt smaller than ever, she found something curled outside her door. It was small, scaled. Its eyes held depths that no young creature should possess. It looked at her. She looked at it. "Hello," she whispered. The hatchling walked past her into her tiny room and settled on her bed as if it had always lived there. Far away, on a moon circled by alien forests, Marcus felt the new bond form. through the vast network of draconic consciousness, through the connection he shared with Ember. He experienced the moment of selection as clearly as if he were there himself. "Another one," he said. "Yes." Ember's voice held warmth and satisfaction. "Another human who shows kindness when no one is watching. Another human who defends the small and strange because it is right. Another worthy speaker." Marcus watched through borrowed eyes as Sophia carefully made a bed for her visitor out of old clothes. He watched her bring water in a cup and set it nearby, just in case. He watched her whisper secrets to a creature she had just met, trusting it with things she had never told anyone. "Will she be all right?" he asked. "She will face trials, as you did. She will have to choose, as you did. But she has the spark. She has what matters." The hatchling looked up at Sophia with ancient eyes, and through the draconic network, Marcus heard the echo of a thought being shared with the young girl for the first time. "You were chosen." He smiled, knowing that everything he had fought for, everything he had sacrificed, had led to this moment and all the moments that would follow. In the grand archive of the draconic consciousness, a record was being written, not just of humanity's history, but of their nature, their contradictions, their stubborn, foolish, magnificent insistence on creating meaning in a meaningless universe. The entry would take eons to complete, but its opening lines were already set. Species, human, status, ongoing. Assessment. In all our billion years of watching, we have never seen anything quite like them. They are chaos and kindness, destruction and creation, despair and stubborn hope. They know they are small. They know they will die. They know the universe does not care about them. And they keep going anyway. They keep loving anyway. They keep creating beauty and meaning and connection, not because it will last, but because the creating itself matters. They are worth preserving. They always were. In a cramped apartment on a mining station, a girl and a hatchling fell asleep curled together, dreaming of stars. In a cabin on a distant moon, an old man and a dragon watched the sunset, content in the knowledge that some stories never truly end. They just find new people to tell them.